You are now listening to the Serious Growth Podcast with your host, Leo Costa Jr.
Listening to one of your songs. What was the name of the song, Charlie? Don't Close Your Eyes. Does that ring a bell to you?
Yes.
Are you the guy that did that? Anyway, so listen, I'm a big fan of music, even though I only played music like a saxophone when I was in school because my dad played it. So I did that too, but I was a big sports guy. But I've always been into music. I love watching on Netflix. I love watching bands. They have a couple things. You probably know this on Facebook or on Netflix, where it's like the breaking up of bands, and they talk about them like when they started. Have you seen that? I assume.
I'm not sure if I've seen that.
Okay, but they have other documentaries on bands. The point is, I love watching the stories behind these bands and some of these rock and rollers, man. It's pretty fascinating, the lifestyle that a lot of you guys live, huh?
Yeah, it can be fascinating.
Yeah, surprising that some of you are still around. I mean, some haven't been, but I get a big kick out of that thing. So I see that your nickname is Damage. I think that kind of says it all, maybe a little bit. I don't know. You're going to tell us. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what got you into music? Is it something you just right off fell in love with, like I did with sports? How did that work for you?
Yeah, from a very early age. In fact, I don't even know how old I was when I first. My parents were big music lovers, so there was always music around the house.
Yeah.
So far back as I can remember, I was probably somewhere between 2 and 3 years old, and music was already like connecting with me at that point.
Did you actually? Are you aware? Were you aware at that time, or when did you actually become aware musically that you really love music? It sounds like your parents had a lot of influence, being a young age like that.
Well, I think when it dawned on me that this is what I wanted to do for my career was when I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan.
I saw them too. I never forget Black and White, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that, and I also remember my parents. Or during that time, it was like, oh my God, these guys are so, they were the fruit boots and the long hair, and they were almost evil back then to some people because they thought they'd never seen something like this. Isn't that true?
Yeah, people were scared of them.
Yeah.
Like parents were scared of them.
Yeah, like this British invasion of some sort, I remember that. I can't believe it. I'm flashing right now in the living room that I was at. So you kind of fell into it right there, huh? And I'm trying to think. How old were you? How old was I? Because we're the same age, I think.
Yeah, I was 5. I turned 6 later that year, but I was 5 when I saw it.
Yeah, I'm a little bit older than you, I think. But so anyway, you got into it then. But run me through that. Like, was the first instrument that you played? Was it in what grade were you in when you started playing, or how did that work?
Well, I picked up the guitar first. My older brother played a little bit, so he had an acoustic guitar, and I would, sneak and play it when he wasn't around.
Yeah.
But, ever since seeing the Beatles, even before I started actually playing, I would just fake it. I'd put on Beatle records and pretend I was playing.
Yeah.
And so around, I would say 8 years old, I started to actually learn to play.
Yeah. So did you learn to play by ear, or did you learn to read music at that point?
No, it was mostly by ear, but with songbooks, they show a little chord chart above the music. Yeah. So I would just go by the chord charts and learn the chords. I didn't actually know how to read the notes of the music.
Yeah. Okay. And when was it that you got into an actual band? When was your first band?
Junior high school.
Junior high school. Did you? Were you the leader of the band, or did you somebody else and you were picked to go in it, or how did that work?
No, it was kind of a combination of me and the bass player. We were best friends, so we put this band together.
Yeah.
And it never, it didn't do much at that point. It was just mostly for fun.
Yeah, like playing in the garage.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Okay. So, and were you a pretty good student in school along the way?
No, not really.
Were you?
I wasn't a big fan of school. I would do as much as I needed to get by.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. So it sounded like you were just getting by in school, but your love was really music.
Yes, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I did great in music classes, in
Yeah.
art classes, that kind of thing. But
Yeah. So when you're playing, I actually remember being in a band too. Like I said, I played saxophone, and this is before I got really involved in high school sports, even though I was in junior high sports. But I tried to do this band thing, and it wasn't easy by any means. I'll tell you that. And so, were you guys, how did you progress in your little band? So you have a band that you're playing with your best friend. What's the next thing that happens?
uh, well, when I got to high school, I just kept sort of switching out with different people and playing in different situations, and I had a kind of a mentor who was a couple, maybe 2 or 3 years older than me, and he kind of took me under his wing. And he was a guitar player, and he would take me to his band's rehearsal, and he had like a professional band,
Yeah.
and so it kind of let me see how it worked, and
Yeah.
and then he would take me along when they did gigs, and I was still underage, and they'd play at clubs, and he'd sneak me in the back door and throw me up on stage and have me sit in for a few songs.
Okay.
So it was almost like throwing me into the deep end.
Yeah.
And that's how I learned to really play with other people. And eventually I had a band that started playing gigs. I mean, it started out slowly. We get gigs here and there, and nothing crazy until probably I was probably 18 or 19. I finally got into a band that started to like regularly like tour around and play clubs and stuff.
Yeah, and when you're starting something like that, how do you get? Is it word of mouth? Do I'm assuming that you play at. Tell me some of the events that you're playing at early on, and then how that progresses, because you just don't, unless you're just super lucky, it just doesn't happen for you. Something has to happen that you get in somewhere, and then it's word of mouth. Tell us a little bit about how that really starts.
Yeah, exactly. It's especially early on, like
Yeah.
in junior high.
Yeah.
It is kind of like a word of mouth. Like our drummer was connected with this church, and they would have these events. So we ended up playing at a couple of those, and then there was a park near my house, and I forget how I stumbled onto that one, but they had this little festival they did in the springtime,
Yeah.
and somehow we got hired to play for that. So just like that, little things like that would happen, and a lot of parties, backyard parties
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and stuff like that, or free events in the park,
Yeah.
and then later, like the band I joined when I was 18, 19, that was a band that I joined. So one of the other guys was actually in charge of it, and he had a bunch of connections, and that's how we started. We ended up relocating down to Alabama, down around Muscle Shoals, which was like really
Ooh.
happening in the mid-70s.
Yeah.
And somehow he had connections down there, and we ended up with a manager and a booking agent. So that's how we
Yeah.
ended up on the circuit down
Yeah,
there.
I'm going to keep taking you back a little bit because I'm interested in this. Muscle Shoals, one of the documentaries that I watched, all those bands, they were like 70s, 80s bands. A lot of those people ended up at Muscle Shoals was like the place to be during those days, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it was very happening down there.
You said you moved from, where did you move from to Alabama?
Oh, I grew up in Maryland.
Oh, okay. All right. So you're not a California boy.
No, I ended up out there though for what was it, 26 years.
Oh,
I just
okay.
recently moved back east to Nashville, so I'm in Nashville now.
Okay, okay. So when you're at this, I'm going to go back to when you were playing like these events, like church events. Okay, so when you play for a church compared to when you play for maybe a spring festival, obviously you have to have a certain amount of music that you can. But you just can't go in with a few songs that you know. You must have played a kind of a variety to be able to go to a church versus other events.
Yeah, I mean we played the same songs no matter
Oh,
where we played, but they
okay.
were just sort of the popular songs at the time,
Okay, like the current hits or something.
Yeah, I mean this was very early '70s, so it was like the Doobie Brothers
Yeah.
or that kind of thing.
Yeah, one of the Doobie Brothers is actually from my town, Visalia. Who is it, Charlie?
Who?
The Doobie Brothers?
Oh,
Tom Johnson. Have you heard of that guy?
Yeah,
Yeah, he's from my town that I live in right now. And anyway, so Doobie Brothers are somebody I really listen to a lot. All right, so anyway, in your little group that you had before you were 18 years of age, were you the lead singer? Were you the main man? How'd you guys get along with that? Because I know sometimes it's hard.
It is. Early the first incarnations of that band, I was the singer because nobody else wanted to sing.
Okay.
So I just took it upon myself to do it. And I'm not a singer, I just have to tell you.
Yeah.
But I was the only one that had enough courage to actually attempt it. And then later on, as it progressed through high school, I'd get in with other guys that were a little bit better than me and they could sing better, so I ended up taking more of the back seat and just doing the harmony vocals.
Gotcha. When you were, I can feel for what you're saying about you weren't really a singer, but you did what you had to do. It took courage to do that, and the only way I can relate to you is I was scared to death to be up in front of a group, public speaking, and singing to me would be a form of public speaking, I would think. And were you like scared, or did you go into a different mode and just say, "Look, it's something I just have to do"? Were you worried about forgetting your lyrics?
Yeah, all that stuff crosses my mind, and it's funny because I look back at those early days and.
All right, let's take a quick break so I can tell you about our product.
Do you want a bone-crushing grip? Good, because you're gonna get one with the amazing new TRS gripper. It's a progressive grip builder with longer handles and a special ergonomic design that's like a dozen hand grippers in one. Start off easy and work your way up to quickly build your grip strength from wet noodle to pulverizing. The package includes a video from the world-famous strength coach, Dr. Russ Horine, the man who worked with Leo Costa to help bring you big beyond belief in the Bulgarian Power Burst. Dr. Horine shows you a simple and easy to follow workout plan that takes just minutes a day right from in front of your TV set if you want. So click on the link below and let's get started building you a stronger, firmer, bone-crushing grip.
I mean, I've been playing professionally now for a long time, but back then I was still trying to figure it out. So I mean, I don't think I ever got through a song without a mistake somewhere.
That's funny. So how did you get through that? I know like Elvis Presley made a lot of mistakes when he sang. I guess a lot of people do. But I guess the key maybe is like in bodybuilding when you're up there doing posing routine to music, if you mess up, the key is don't let everybody know that you messed up. You just kind of keep going through, and sometimes most of the time they don't even know. I mean, how did you deal with that? When you forget a song, did you ever forget it's like I can just see myself forgetting to the point where it's like, somebody help me. Where do I go from here? Did that ever happen to you?
It has, but most of the time it's like you're saying, I just pretend it didn't happen, or I had to learn. Actually, I had to learn that. I think somebody may have pointed it out to me. Because I have had a tendency to like make a face if I mess up or something.
Yeah.
And somebody mentioned it at one point. They said, maybe you shouldn't make a face when you mess up because nobody's going to know unless you let them know.
Yeah.
So
that's so true.
So I learned to keep the poker face.
Oh, man. I don't know if I could do that. In bodybuilding, I did that, but I wasn't speaking. I was just using my body. I could go to another pose and get by that way. But I guess when you're singing all the time, you can kind of figure it out and kind of, I guess get your way through. Obviously, you did.
Yeah.
Oh, God, that would drive me crazy. Okay, so anyway, when you got into these bands now, you're playing more the, was it the harmony or what did you call it? The bass? I don't know what you call it. You were behind the scenes now more in the band?
Well, I was always lead guitar, but as far as vocals go, I just did the backup vocals. I didn't do any lead vocals.
Okay, and did you guys ever have any issues with I want to do lead this time, or was it just everybody was fine with whoever was doing the lead in your band?
Yeah. There weren't any problems there. Yeah. I mean, I'd rather have somebody else sing lead anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So when was your first that you would say that now you get into this band, or you're 18, 19 years of age. What would you say was your first biggest gig that you did, and why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Wow, that's a good question. I'm trying to think back.
Is it hazy? I wonder if
Yeah.
did
Yeah,
anything have something to do with that
well,
besides age?
it was such a long progression.
Yeah.
It was like before I knew it, we were playing. I guess. God, I don't even know.
I mean, like the first bodybuilding show I did, Charlie, I was scared shitless for that first show. I'll never forget that. Never. Because, we do all this before we go on stage. We're practicing our routine, Brian. And the first time that I did my routine, right before I go on, and I practiced this routine for hours and months at a time before this happened. And just before I go on, they called my name to go out. I forgot my damn routine. I couldn't even tell you how to start my routine. I walked out there, and I had enough muscle memory, and I just went out there. I don't remember it. And I had people telling me after the show, man, you posed really well. And I didn't even remember that. And that scared me to death because I said, how can I forget something like this? That ever happened to you guys? Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have a question for you. So when you're doing your routine,
Yeah.
how long is a routine?
Only a minute and a half.
Really?
Yeah, only a minute and a half, Brian.
Okay.
And you guys are doing this whole song. I mean, a song is what, 3, 4, 5 minutes?
Yeah.
And you don't remember the first time you went out? Oh my God.
Well, I remember some of the early shows. I did do one show. I was still in high school, and it was for another church event thing. There was a weekend dance, and somehow I got hired for that. My band got hired, and we weren't even. I mean, we were horrible back then. I mean, some of those early bands were just horrendous. I don't know how people could sit through it.
Did you guys think you were good?
Yeah. So I remember we were playing. We were doing just a combination of a mix of songs, and one of them was "Rock and Roll" by Led Zeppelin, and this is the band that I was still singing the lead vocals, and I started that song. And this happened a few times early on where I couldn't find the key. Like I'd start to sing, and the regular key just was too high. I couldn't hit it.
Yeah.
Because I'm no Robert Plant by any stretch, but so I think I had to drop it down to a lower key, and I don't even want to know how bad that must have sounded. Luckily, nobody had cell phones back in those days.
Yeah. Check this out. Yeah, that's when you drop it down a key. I mean, I'm assuming everybody else has to follow your lead.
Well, we're still playing in the same key. It's just me trying to find it. It's like
That's too funny. That's some of the good stuff on it. I know it's kind of funny when you look back, and you think you're really good at that time, and then you get a lot more experience, and you get better, and you look back, and like you said, oh my God, and I thought I was good back then.
Oh, I know. I mean, yeah, trying to impress girls and stuff. And they're probably going, oh man.
That's pretty funny. What was the biggest event that you guys played at? How many fans?
Like in my whole career?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a good question too. Probably 20,000, maybe more.
Ooh, that's good. Where was that?
We've done a bunch of festivals, so and festivals and arenas. So we did Philadelphia Spectrum with the Kinks one time.
Oh, I remember.
So
did you guys open for them? Is that what you did?
Oh yeah, of course.
I'm assuming it, but I'm going to make sure.
Yeah, but we've done a lot of festivals. There's one called Rocklahoma that when Kix came back around in the 2000s, that was our first big gig.
Okay.
It was like 2008.
Yeah.
And that was 20,000 people.
Nice. Was that pretty, were you stoked about that, being in front of that many people?
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I played in front of in football, I played in front of some, 30, 40,000 people. It's hard for me to sleep after games like that. That energy that those people have. I mean, is that the way you feel as a band member like that?
Oh, yeah. You definitely get that feedback from the crowd.
Yeah.
When we back in the late '80s, our first actual arena tour. Like we used to do one-offs here and there at bigger events, but our first real extended tour where we actually had a tour bus and all that stuff.
Ooh, baby.
We went out with Rat, and the tour ended up coming back around to our hometown, right outside of D.C., and this place called the Capitol Center, that's where I saw all my concerts growing up at the Capitol Center. So we get there, and it was sold out, and when we hit the stage, the sound of the crowd was like deafening, and everybody had their lighters. This is also pre-cell phones, so everybody still had lighters. They're all holding up their lighters, and that crowd sang every single song that we did. The crowd was singing.
Really?
I mean, that was probably one of the highlights, I would say, of our career.
It's one of the best forms of flattery, isn't it? When they're mimicking you.
Yeah.
You know, I would think so. That is amazing. And then, so with the tours that you went on, what was like your biggest tour that you went on? Did you go somewhere? Were you only in the States, or did you go to Europe and like some of these bands do?
Well, as far as like an extended tour, it was usually the U.S. I mean, we did go, like we went to Japan a few times, and I've been to Europe with my other band, Rhino Bucket, but mostly the arena. We did arena tours, and then we also did when was it? 89. We did like an amphitheater tour with Tesla and Great White, which was all those outdoor amphitheaters.
Yeah.
We got to play Red Rocks in outside of Denver. It's like a really, really nice venue.
Yeah. Did you have like a certain venue that you liked? Did you like the outside versus like the big arenas, or the more sort of the smaller events where you could be more personable with the with what? Like the clubs? Yeah, clubs. What did you prefer?
You know, it's funny because I mean it's really cool to be able to do arenas or those big festivals, but I actually prefer the small little sweaty clubs.
Yeah. It's a more intimate? Do you feel like you're connecting more with the crowd? Is that why?
Well, that and it just sounds better because it's just a more enclosed space, and you know you get out on those big stages and it's like too much space.
Yeah. And when you're out in a big environment like that, is there like a delay or a reverb like when you're singing that distracts you?
There can be, yeah. Like an arena, they're not really set up for music.
Yeah.
You know, they're sports.
Yeah.
So when you're on those stages, it's like echoing. You can hear it bouncing off the back wall.
That would be kind of weird, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I know, like when I was back in the early days talking to people in Europe, you know how you talk and that there's a big delay before you hear them again? That was always very distracting, so I'm assuming it's something like that?
Yeah. Well, luckily, you know, you have your amps there on stage, so you can hear them. It's not as loud as the actual echo. But
so it's more real time. You can tell what's going on when you're singing, I guess.
Yeah, unless you get too far away from the amp, you know, then you're hearing like weird stuff.
Yeah. You said you were in a group called Kix and Rhino Bucket. Tell me, how were they similar and how were they different? If that's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's funny because Rhino Bucket, they were around back in their early '90s, and while I was doing the Kix thing, I heard of Rhino Bucket, so I was actually a fan of theirs back then. And then they ended up breaking up. And then when I moved to LA, I ended up playing with those guys in different bands, like the bass player in a blues band. And then finally, when they decided to reform, they asked me if I wanted to play guitar because their guitar player didn't want to do it.
Oh, okay.
So this was during downtime with Kix. Like, I left Kix initially in '93, and then Kix reformed in 2003. So there was like a 10-year gap for Kix. And in that time is when I ended up joining Rhino Bucket. And they are, like Kix is a hard rock band. I'd say we're influenced by like AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, Aerosmith, Cheap Trick, you know, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Rhino Bucket is more like just AC/DC, like just straight ahead raw.
Yeah.
It's like stripped down.
Yeah. Yeah. What made you guys break up in Kix? How did that dissolve? Why did that happen?
Well, first of all, I left. I was the first one to leave in '93, and they kept it going. They kept it going until '95, and that's
Yeah.
when they finally called it quits. But I got to the I got to that point. We had been together, was it 19 years or so at that point, and we had the album with "Don't Close Your Eyes" on it. "Blow My Fuse" was our biggest record, and that happened in '88. And then we did a follow up, which was an even better record. But that's when the whole grunge thing, music scene came in, and it just killed the hard rock scene.
Yeah.
So when we put the follow up to "Blow My Fuse," this record called "Hotwire," put that out, and it just came out and just started going down, and I was just so disillusioned by that. I knew that we weren't gonna make, like, I thought finally we're gonna be the next AC/DC or whatever.
Yeah.
And I knew it wasn't gonna happen at that point, and I didn't want to go back down through what I just come up through for
Yeah.
19 years. So I decided I wanted to do something different, and that's when I left and went to LA.
That must have been a difficult choice for you, especially when you're in it that long at that point. Because, through a career, and it happens in sports careers, bands career, you're going to have ups and downs, and for you to make that call, because, you never know. And who knows how that turns in another couple of years. And yet you made that decision. You must have really known in your heart of hearts that it just wasn't the right thing for that place at that time, wasn't the right thing for you. It had to be a tough call.
Yeah, it was, and there were some internal problems in the band at that point, and I knew that the fact that we were going back down, that it would amplify those internal problems,
Yeah.
and it was just something I didn't think it was worth it anymore.
Yeah.
To have to deal with.
Like I said, I feel for you. It seems like that kind of tear you apart for a while. Did you have any? I mean, did you go from one band to the other, or did you have downtime? Again, I'm just, a lot of these shows that I see about rockers, they go into these deep, dark places, and sometimes they're there for quite a while. I mean, did you experience any of that when you broke up with one band? In the meantime, looking for something else in LA, in this case.
Yeah, well, in that instance, I had something lined up out in LA.
Yeah.
Like I knew I was going to leave probably 4 or 5 months before I actually left. So I would take I had frequent flyer miles saved up.
Yeah.
So I'd take those miles and I'd fly out to LA. I hooked up with a couple other guys, and then we put something together. So I'd go, like, once a month, I'd go out there and we'd do a bunch of rehearsals. So when I finally left Kix, I went, and I got to LA, I had a band lined up.
Okay.
But the '90s were a dark area. That was a dark time for me. I ended up getting into drugs. I mean, being a musician, there was always drugs and alcohol around.
Yeah.
But I kind of, it's weird because we were like really professional. Like, nobody drank or did drugs before
really?
a show. Like, we took it serious.
Yeah.
I mean, afterwards was a different story, but all our performances, we weren't drinking or doing anything. So, I found out later that I'm actually an alcoholic, and all those years of not drinking while I was playing, I figured I was in control of it.
Right.
And I found out when I got to LA, and I kind of relaxed with that a little bit. I wasn't in control of it at all, and it took me. I did a nosedive, and by the end of the '90s, I ended up first in jail and then rehab, and I've been sober since April Fool's Day, 1998.
I found that an interesting day that you that you started your sobriety on April Fool's. Was there
Yeah.
was there something to that behind the scenes of why you did it on that day?
Yes, there is.
Thought so.
I was initially arrested on March 24th. So at first that was my sobriety date, but while I was in jail, I was coming off of heroin and
Oh my.
like crack and heroin. I was doing everything,
Wow.
and so they had me in this. It was called the pill ward in jail, and I had to take Thorazine, and it was horrendous.
What does Thorazine do? Does that help you wean off whatever you're on or something, or make it easier to come off, or what?
It's supposed to, but yeah, it's a heavy tranquilizer, and
Yeah.
it was. Oh man, that was a rough one. So I was dealing with the Thorazine thing, and it got to the point where I didn't want to take it anymore. But they'd give it to you, and they'd stand there and watch you take it, like you had to take your meds. And I got to where I was able to shove it up in between my teeth and my gums,
Yeah.
or cheek,
Yeah.
and I'd walk away, and then I'd spit it out. And then I would trade it for like other things, like
God.
candy bars or whatever.
Yeah.
But so when I finally got sober, it was when I was coming up on a year of sobriety. I thought back to that gray area when I was in that pill ward, and I thought, I don't consider myself sober at that time because I was doing the Thorazine thing, and
Yeah.
so I moved my date up to April 1st just to make it clear.
Yeah. There you go. No, that makes sense. When I saw that, I thought, wait a minute, what's going on here?
That's the perfect day for that.
Exactly. No kidding. Now, when you were in jail, how long did you stay there? Did they have like a ward for, I assume that there's like a hospital type environment for people that are trying to come off shit like this, or what?
No, it wasn't a hospital environment at
No?
all. It was just this huge dorm with like probably 75 inmates, and everybody had their own issue that they were dealing with. But yeah, so it was just basically the pill ward. So in the morning when they did the roll call, you'd come out and pass by the little window, and they'd pass out it's almost like that movie, The Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, yeah, I know. Saw that one, yeah.
Pass out your little cup with your pills in it.
Yeah. Wow. And how long did it take you, do you think, that did you beat this thing while you were in jail? How long did you stay in jail? And if you don't mind me asking, why did you go to jail? And it's something to do with drugs, but how long were you there? And how did you get there?
I was in there for about 15 days, which is not bad,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was, at that point in my life, I was starting to get having run-ins with the law at that point.
Yeah.
Like I got pulled over a lot, and there was one other arrest and then another where they detained me, and then they ended up letting me go. But there was like court dates involved, all that.
Yeah.
My life was falling apart at that point.
Sounds like it. Sounds like you're in real trouble.
Yeah. So so that 15 days that I spent in jail, there's a little bug flying around here. It gave me clarity. Like I had a moment of clarity at some point, where, it kind of came to me. It's like, how did I end up here?
Yeah.
And I had, memories of those arena shows and all that stuff. And then here I am, an inmate in jail. And out in LA, there was this agency called the Musicians Assistance Program, which is now, it was taken over by Music Cares, who does the Grammys and all that. But they help musicians with, to get sober and pay for their rehabs and stuff. So my girlfriend at the time contacted them, and then they hooked me up with an attorney. And the guy came and visited me while I was in jail, and he arranged to get me out of jail if I agreed to go straight to a rehab. So that's how I got out of jail. Because otherwise I would have been in there probably at least 90 days or so.
Yeah. And then once you got into that rehab, I mean, how do you know that you really kicked it? I mean, before you answer that question, this area, the dark days, is this before you got into Rhino Bucket, or was this during Rhino Bucket? Was that
No,
what timeline?
it was it was before Rhino Bucket, but I
Okay.
was already playing in bands with the bass player, and then him and the singer came into like there was another band with those two involved. So I'd known those guys during my dark time. Yeah.
Okay. So then you're going to rehab, and how do you really know that you kicked it? And is it something that, once you're kind of out there again, are you really afraid? Share with us some of your emotions, because I could see when I came out of something like that, that I would be just one drink away or one cigarette away. I was very addicted to cigarettes, and I just know that I know now that if I take a puff off one, I'm dead in the water. I already know that, and it took a while for me to be able to turn all that down. And it's funny because when I look back at that now, I think to myself, how did I ever allow myself to even do that? It's disgusting. I have that mentality towards it now. So how was it, coming off those dark days like that? How did you get to the point where you were confident that you could deal with real world?
That is a good question. I it's funny because I've told this story a lot about getting to the rehab. My girlfriend picked me up from jail, and I was supposed to go straight to the rehab, but I had her stop at the house because the clothes that they gave back to me at the end of my jail stay were the same clothes that I wore in there, and they had been tied into a little plastic bag, and they smelled horrible. So I talked my girlfriend into stopping by the house so I could at least grab some clean clothes before I got to the rehab. But when she dropped me off in front of that place, like I had no idea what I was in for. And I just remember walking up to the front doors, and it was almost like this symbolic thing. I opened that door, and I remember thinking, like, I'm walking away from this old life, and I'm walking into a new life. I don't want that old life anymore. I want this new life.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what the new life was yet, but I think it was just this, this willingness to just open my mind to whatever was going to come. And I think that's really what saved me.
Yeah.
And then once I got there, this whole, Alcoholics Anonymous, they have the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I started reading that book, and it explained everything that I had gone through my whole life. Like, that I could look back at all those years of the drinking and doing drugs, like before it became a problem, and see how it progressed to that point that it did. And I think just, educating myself on the disease, and I could see my behaviors, just like you were saying with the cigarette thing. I could look back and like when I was having a Coke problem at one point, I realized I had to stop drinking or I couldn't stop doing the Coke, because as soon as I took one drink, I'd be doing Coke again. I had no say in the thing. So I made those connections, and the other thing, about getting sober is you take away the drugs and alcohol, and then you have to replace it with something. You can't just leave an empty hole. So, it taught me to trust, like, the universe. I mean, I had a problem with God when I got there too. I didn't believe in God, and so I had to sort of learn or come up with my own understanding of that, of God or higher power.
Yeah.
And I refer to it as the universe, because it's like the life force of the universe, and I just had to learn how to trust it.
Yeah.
So
interesting. Let me ask you something, because I can correlate a lot of this stuff with something that happened to me, and you're saying some things that are triggers in your words. But along the way, like when you were in this darkest moment, did you have to be willing to deal with being ashamed of yourself for how you just, ended up that you did? Did you have to deal with that? I mean, I would think that I had to deal with some things in my life where I had to come to grips. My dad once used to tell me, if you ever want to find out what the problem is, 95% of the time it's right in the mirror when you're looking at it, And was that a part of your healing, was to get to that point and you have to deal with, I'm ashamed of myself, or, did all those feelings go through that before you finally came out the other side? I mean, as a part of the process?
Yes, yes.
I think it's
Yeah.
important, don't you?
Huh?
I said, I think it's important to really be healed. I think that part of it, you got to go through that again.
Oh yeah. Because near the end of my using days, I hated myself. I mean, I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror anymore.
Yeah.
It was like I would look at myself and I just want to punch myself.
Yeah.
Like I just couldn't understand why I was like I was. Like I had no. I wasn't educated in the whole, drug addiction, disease, and all that stuff. So I didn't know. I just thought something was wrong with me.
Right.
And so yeah, once I did get sober, I mean that's the whole process of, the whole 12 steps of of Alcoholics Anonymous. You kind of, it takes you through that process
Yeah.
to heal. You have to make this list of resentments, and I was the top resentment on that list because I resented myself for letting myself get to that point.
Well, you know something, and a lot of people, unless they go through something like that, it happened to you because of drugs and alcohol. Mine happened to me because of 3 strokes in 3 weeks that I had. And, it's just something, because I'm in a sport where I'm telling people how to be healthy. This ended up happening to me, and I had some accountability that I had to deal with because of that. And I don't think that people really understand what that really feels like unless you're in those days. And it's hard for me to really understand what you're going through unless I go through something similar, because it's pretty heavy stuff, right? It's like, somebody on the outside go, hey man, that's not that hard. So you got, just pull yourself out of it. It doesn't work like that a lot of times, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because
Yeah.
I remember the bass player for Rhino Bucket, him and I were hanging out this was back when I was still doing the drugs, and we played in a blues band together. And I remember, I remember it was when things were really starting to fall apart for me. And one day he just said to me, he goes, I don't understand. Why can't you just get a job? And he thought like if I got a job that it would make me
all
stop.
better now.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I know that's the point that I'm trying to make. And something else that I sense that you did, and it's something that I did, is you stated a goal. I always talk about stating a goal when you're trying to do something, when you're trying to attain anything, sobriety, put on muscle. I don't give a damn what it is. You have to, in my opinion, you got to state the goal. You got to be clear about your goal. And I think what you did was that, and it led you to, on your bio, I noticed all of a sudden you wanted to become healthy again. That sounds to me like that was your stated goal. Am I right or am I off? Let's take a quick pause to tell you about something you are definitely going to want.
Do you want a bone-crushing grip? Good, because you're gonna get one with the amazing new TRS gripper. It's a progressive grip builder with longer handles and a special ergonomic design that's like a dozen hand grippers in one. Start off easy and work your way up to quickly build your grip strength from wet noodle to pulverizing. The package includes a video from the world-famous strength coach, Dr. Russ Horine, the man who worked with Leo Costa to help bring you big beyond belief in the Bulgarian power burst. Dr. Horine shows you a simple and easy to follow workout plan that takes just minutes a day right from in front of your TV set if you want. So click on the link below and let's get started building you a stronger, firmer, bone-crushing grip.
Right. Yeah. After I got sober, well, actually, this is the funny thing too. I wasn't really a smoker until I got sober, and I smoked for like my first 3 years of sobriety, and then I had to stop that. And that, talk about hard. That was really hard. But so at that point, and I think that's why I was able to quit, because I was interested in getting healthy, and I knew that was like the worst thing I could do for my health. And the other thing was I gained some weight in rehab, when I got to rehab, I weighed 119 pounds, if you can
Ooh.
believe that.
How tall are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 5'8".
Yeah, 119 is pretty thin.
Yeah, I was like a skeleton with skin.
Ah,
So, uh, but as soon as I got to rehab, because I was spending all my money on drugs, I wasn't
yeah,
eating. So when I got to rehab, I just ate everything in
right.
sight, and I gained like in the first 2 weeks, I think I gained a good 20 pounds.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so at some point, I was, I got sober at 40. So I'm middle aged, and my body's starting to change. So once I got sober, well, here's another motivation factor was when Kix got back together. We got back together at the end of 2003. Our lead singer Steve, I hadn't seen him in 10 years, and we were getting changed for the gig, and he looked great, like he'd been working out. And I saw him, and I thought, that's what I want to look like.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, he inspired me. I
yeah.
saw that, and I wasn't at that point. I wasn't like overweight or anything, but I was just kind of soft, and
Skinny fat, we call that skinny fat.
yeah, and I didn't have any definition, nothing. So I see Steve, and I'm like, wow, how did you do that?
Yeah.
And he turned me on, like early on. He turned me on to P90X,
Okay.
and that's how I got into it. And that was actually a good starting point because it sort of taught me routine
Yeah.
and to my priority, like to start my day with that and that whole thing. And I've since sort of moved on to other things, but yeah. So that was really my inspiration, was seeing Steve.
Yeah, and that was your. I can see that was your new stated goal, and then you got into that just like I did. I made a promise to myself. I competed in bodybuilding for 15 years. In that sport, it's extreme behavior, like it is with a lot of rock bands. Ours is usually steroids. There's a lot of that stuff going on. And of course, alcohol is involved too, because you're always trying to come down from something. So it's kind of similar that way, And I after I had these strokes, and it wasn't necessarily because of my one thing. It was because of, at that point in my life, everything was extreme behavior. My body just finally just couldn't take it anymore. So when I got to that deep, dark level is when I said, you know what? I'm going to pay my body back in a good way and make it as healthy as I possibly can, because it tolerated so much abuse, and I'm still here. And I thought that's the least that I could do for myself.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly the way I think about it. And also, I've come to realize that my body is a gift.
Yeah.
It's been given to me, and I abused it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I need to show some, gratitude
Exactly.
for being given this body. So yeah, that was another motivation.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really have done anyway, just as a part of my own personality, and I get the sense that you started doing this, was that I had to understand the demons, the evils out there, and the disease, in my case, with the strokes, things like how many people survive it. It was a bad, bad number. The obstacles were against me because I had 3 of them in 3 weeks. But I needed to face that. Everything about, so I could, because the stated goal is to get really healthy again. Well, I needed to know exactly everything to the nth degree that was against me and the things that I could do to overcome that. It was just another thing that I had to overcome, but I had to know all the information, good and bad. Would you agree that?
And yes, yes,
Right?
yes. Yeah, because when I started to get healthy, physically healthy, with the exercise and all that is one thing, but later the nutrition thing
Right.
came in, which is a whole nother thing. And there's so much disinformation out there,
Yep.
especially on. It's ridiculous, and it's still there.
Yep.
Like, even though it's been proven wrong, and people are coming out with what's the truth. All those old myths are still floating around, and doctors even still believe this stuff.
In some cases, doctors are the worst because they don't really have that much of their training is in nutrition. I know exactly what you're talking about, because when this happened to me, my doctor says, my cardiologist, mind you, because I went back and I had all these tests done, and I knew a lot about my diet because as a bodybuilder, you know everything about diet. You do. The people that are students of the game, we know that stuff. And I went, one year I just went, I made some, I know how to use macros and how they work together or against each other. And I go back in a year because I had to get a hernia surgery. The doctor asked me, they did some tests on me. They said, you've actually reduced your little bit of heart disease that you had, which was hardly anything, but you reduced it another 15%. How did you do that? There's where I thought, okay, there's something wrong here. What the hell is he doing asking me that? I'm glad he did, but he was humble enough, I guess, to ask me. I guess I could look at it that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So what kind of diet are you following these days now?
At present moment, I'm doing the carnivore thing.
Okay.
I mean, I got here through keto. That was a long transition too, but I can't even remember the year. Maybe 2016. Whenever the Bulletproof Coffee guy, Dave Asprey, came around, he caught my ear, and it still took a little while to go full keto, but I did that, and at that point, like I hadn't been eating meat for like I can't remember. I think I stopped in the early 80s.
Yeah.
I stopped eating meat because back then they said it was bad for you.
Right.
So I was basically a pescatarian. I ate fish.
Yeah.
But I fell for the whole low fat thing, all that, that they tried to tell you. And so it was the Dave Asprey thing that sort of got me to start looking at stuff. And through that, I found, what's his name? Jason Fung with the fasting thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another book I read, Cholesterol Clarity, I think it's called.
There's a lot of them out there, yeah. A lot of misconceptions. One of the things I'd like to try to find for you if I can on my end. I wrote a book with a doctor called Dr. Mauro Di Pasquale, The Anabolic Diet. He's the guy that did metabolic diet as well. Does that name ring a bell to you?
No, but I'm interested.
Okay, if I can find that. I sold that for years, and it was at that point when I was selling that, it was very controversial because fat was the main source of energy. It's like the keto diet. We did a little twist on that, but I know what you're saying. I'd like to see if I can find that book for you or some information because we sold it years ago, and I think you'd find it pretty interesting because it really correlates a lot with your keto diet and the carnivore diet to some degree.
Yeah, well, the one thing, the reason I jumped into the cholesterol research thing was because I had gone to a new doctor and I had a blood test done, and they always get worried about the LDL. I mean, that's all they get.
Right.
And but she goes, I'm worried about this LDL number, but because your HDL is so high and your triglycerides are so low, which is what you want.
Exactly.
She goes, I'm not going to worry about it, but she goes, I want you to take another test in 3 months and a follow-up. And she goes, so she was trying to recommend the standard American diet to me. Like, I want you to eat more whole grains and fruits and vegetables and low fat and exercise more, and and at that point I was like in really good shape, and I just started the keto thing, and she goes, so I told her what I was eating, and she was like horrified. So I said, well, I'll do the test in 3 months, and she goes, well, what are you going to do in the meantime? And I go, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. So I did the test again, and my numbers were even better, but she just kept looking at that LDL, and she suggested, well, for one thing, in that 3 months, I lost 5 pounds, and I'm not, I'm already kind of small anyway, and she was like alarmed at the fact that I lost that much weight in that short amount of time. Yeah. And then she looked at my cholesterol again, and she wanted to put me on a statin.
Oh yeah.
And I said, no, I'm not doing it. And then she goes, and she also wrote on a little prescription thing for me to buy some of that Ensure drink because I lost that weight.
Yeah, wow.
And, that's corn syrup.
Yeah.
So when that happened, I said, that's it for that doctor. I'm not going back.
Yeah.
So anyway, that caused me to really jump into the research and learn everything I could about cholesterol
Yep.
and fasting and all that stuff that goes along with it.
There's a lot to it, and there's that in that area. I mean, there's confusion in our industry, as it relates to training and nutrition. There's a lot of misconception, and that's not that unusual. But diet is all screwed up. It's upside down. And what I learned, again, you and I are kind of talking the same way, is that a lot of these doctors just really don't understand how nutrition and how the macros interact with the body. And you prove that. I've proved that. But you'll still get those people out there that just, I've told people, like in recovery of overcoming a stroke paralysis, as I did, I said, you got to be willing to, if you can think for yourself, if you haven't been that impaired like that, you have to be that a part of that recovery and learn about the, like what you're doing about the diet and every aspect of the diet, because you're going to get some really bad information if you don't, and you're putting yourselves at the hands of somebody that might make you even worse.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's an important lesson to learn.
Yeah, and because I know people that, like friends of mine, that have fallen for what their doctors tell them.
Yeah.
And their health has just gotten worse and worse
Yeah.
and worse. And I try to talk to them, and they're looking at me like, well, you're not the doctor.
Yeah, exactly. No, I know. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Listen, I am. Before we leave, Charlie's the one. He's sitting here next to me. He's a big music fan, and he's had bands and all that. And he's actually responsible for bringing you on the show. Charlie, do you have anything you want to ask Brian?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Two things.
Can you hear him? Okay.
Yeah.
You want this?
Yeah. Okay, two things. One, I saw you did a song for The Wrestler with the newer band you were in. Yeah, and then the second one is just a little story, but I kind of want, if you have any good memories of it. But like he said, I was in bands, and it happens to be 420. I used to smoke a lot of pot, and one of the songs I listened to was Don't Close Your Eyes. But then, later on in life, right after high school, and my bands were, I left one of my bands that were playing the Whiskey and the Roxy and stuff. That song helped get me through so many really depressing times, really dark times. So thank you very much for that song. And I just want to know if you have any cool memories about the studio or anything with that song. I would love to hear.
Yeah. Well, to answer you, the first question, or the first thing you mentioned, the wrestler. That was the thing with Rhino Bucket. We got, because we were LA based, we got connected with that whole sports show. Like Rhino Bucket's on a lot of sports shows and stuff like that. They use the music for that because it's got that AC/DC energy. And the wrestler thing just sort of, our record company. Well, when that movie came out, it was an indie film, and they didn't have a budget or anything, so we just sort of gave them that song to use, and we didn't even get compensated up front for it. But later on, we got residuals from it. But and then it turned into a hit movie, so that was cool.
Yeah.
But it was that song. It's so funny because you'll get it onto a soundtrack, but in the scene, he's in the gym and it's playing in the speaker way in the background. If you're not paying attention, you never even hear it back there. But but anyway, for Don't Close Your Eyes, I've heard that from a lot of people that it's an anti-suicide song, but our bass player wrote that. The bass player at the time, I remember. Here's a memory of that song. We would have a ballad on the record, but for some reason the record company never released the ballad as a single, and that includes Don't Close Your Eyes was not going to be released at first. And we were on tour with Tesla and Great White, and Great White's manager at the time was this guy named Alan Niven, who also managed Guns N' Roses, who were huge at the time. And we came off stage one night, and he said, "Hey, that song, Don't Close Your Eyes." He goes, "How come it's not a single?" And we were like, I don't know, the record company doesn't think it's good enough, I guess. And he said, and also I think our manager had mentioned it to the record company, and they turned him down. They were like, no, it's time to start thinking about the next record. And then, so Alan Niven goes, you mind if I talk to them about that? So he called Atlantic Records and told them that they would be crazy if they didn't release that song. And they listened to him, and they released it, and it ended up being a hit. So
Isn't that something? How you go from wanting to pan a song, and it goes to being a great hit. Like, who knows what really is going on? Who knows best when it comes to that? I mean, in some ways, do you think it's a crapshoot? How does a guy like that think it's not worth a shit, and yet it does that? I mean, it makes me think that guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's just out there just throwing darts, and you can do it eyes closed or eyes open. It's about the same. You get the same effect, in my opinion. I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's weird because record companies, like the guys that work for record companies, they just sort of go by a formula. They sometimes you'll get a guy that knows what he's talking about, but half the time they don't. And if you don't fit into a certain slot, they don't know what to do with you. And it is luck, and it's a lot about timing and luck, and being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, man. That song did wonders growing up.
Awesome. Anyway, Brian, I really appreciate you coming on the show. It's I learned a lot from you. Like I said, I'm really fascinated by you guys in that industry, and I'm happy to see that you came out the other end and you look healthy, and you look like you're in a good spot in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by your line of work as well. I'm just, especially now that I'm into this whole thing. It's, I work out, but I'm always worried about getting too big because I'm a rock and roll guy. I got to be
right. You got to look.
So I have to try to do this mixture of muscle and still stay small.
Kind of like wiry strong, Yeah. Anyway, I'll look for some stuff. Charlie, let's look for some stuff, and if we can get something out to you, we'll get something out to you. Anytime you have if and when you get this stuff, anytime you have a question about it, please reach out. I mean, this is all I do. I've been doing this in the industry, teaching people for 40 years now about nothing more than nutrition and and how exercise impacts the body. So feel free.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for coming on again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Serious Growth Podcast. For more episodes like the one you just listened to, subscribe to us on your mobile podcast app and leave us a review. If you'd like to reach out, you can find us online at seriousgrowth.com. Until next time, train smart and train hard.